In your math notebook, you're going to turn to the table of contents. You're going to write shapes, page 46 through 49. After you write that in your table of contents, you're going to turn to page 46, and you're going to glue down this page here. Make sure that you write page 46 wherever you're keeping up with your page numbers. Now, there is nothing for us to write on this page. We are going to talk about what's on this page. First, it talks about the angles. Last year in 4th grade, you measured angles using a protractor, unless that was one of the skills that you didn't get to because we ended school early due to COVID. However, you should know that an angle that's less than 90 degrees is acute, like, oh, it's so cute. One that's exactly 90 degrees, which looks like a corner of a piece of paper, a T or an L, that's a right angle. If it's larger than 90 degrees, then it's an obtuse angle. And if it's 180 degrees, then it's a straight angle. Okay, you're not going to measure anything, but you do need to know that because when we classify triangles in 5th grade, you need to sometimes classify them by their angles. So if all 3 angles are acute, which means all 3 are less than 90 degrees, it's an acute triangle. If it has just one right angle, then the whole triangle is a right triangle. If it has just one obtuse angle, then the whole triangle is an obtuse triangle. So sometimes when we classify triangles, we classify them by their angles. Sometimes when we classify triangles, we classify them by their sides. So if all 3 of the sides are the same length, it's called an equilateral triangle. If just 2 of the sides are the same, it's called isosceles. And if none of the sides are the same, it's called scalene. So sometimes you will see markings to signal to notify you that the angles are the same. I'm sorry, that the sides are the same. So if it has marks on it like this and no measurements, if it doesn't give you a measure and it just gives you a mark, that's telling you that this, and this are all the same length because you're not going to have a tool to measure it. So on this one, it would just have a mark here and here to tell you that those 2 are the same length. You should know that this little square in here means that's a right angle. If it didn't have any markings in it, you could use the corner of your scratch paper. You put the corner of your scratch paper inside the triangle, inside the angle that you're measuring, and you can see this side and this side match up perfectly, so it's a right angle. On this one here, you can see that one side matches perfectly, but the other side kicks out, so that's an obtuse angle. And then when the angle, one side matches up and the other side goes underneath the paper, that's an acute angle. Because you won't have protractors this year, but you can still measure them with the corner of your paper. All right, so that was all about angles and triangles on page 46. Now we're going to move to page 47, and you need to glue down this page on page 47. Again, there is nothing for us to write on page 47, but we are going to talk about what's on here. So first it talks about the difference between a polygon and not a polygon. So a polygon has to be closed, so it can't be open like this. It has to be straight sides. So a circle, and you can write this on there if you want, is not a polygon. Not a polygon. Because it has to have straight sides, and a circle does not have straight sides. So it has to be closed, it has to have straight sides, and none of the sides can like overlap each other. So all of these here are examples of polygons. Triangle, pentagon, let's do this. Triangle has 3 sides, quadrilateral has 4 sides, pentagon has 5 sides, hexagon has 6 sides. The way I tell students to remember hexagon, because a lot of times they confuse hexagon and octagon, but hexagon, hex, the 3rd letter is an X, and 6, the 3rd letter is an X. So that's how you can remember that a hexagon has 6 sides, and then an octagon has 8 sides. I do want to write down a couple of more on here. So over here on the side, I want you to write nonagon is 9 sides. Decagon is 10 sides. So you should be familiar with the prefixes on these words and meaning how many sides they have. Nonagon is 9, deca is 10, quad is 4, tri is 3, penta is 5, octa, like an octopus, is 8, and hex is 6. Oh, 7's not on here. Let's put 7 on here. I forgot 7. So septagon is 7 sides. Our focus this year in 5th grade for shapes is going to be triangles that we already discussed and quadrilaterals. So we're going to, because there are several different types of quadrilaterals, we're going to look at those in more detail, and you're going to be asked to classify those in lots of different ways. So a parallelogram is a quadrilateral, so that means it has 4 sides. It has opposite sides are parallel. That means they are side by side and they never touch. Opposite sides are parallel. And opposite sides are equal in length. So the top is equal to the bottom and the left and right are equal to each other. A rectangle is a parallelogram. So you can call this shape a rectangle. You can also call this shape a parallelogram because opposite sides are the same length and opposite sides are parallel. But however, a rectangle also has 4 right angles. So I can call this shape a parallelogram, I can call this shape a rectangle, but I cannot call this shape a rectangle. Why can't I call this shape a rectangle? Because it's missing the 4 right angles. In order to be called a name, in order for a shape to be called different names, it has to have all the properties or all the characteristics of that shape, and this doesn't have all the characteristics of a rectangle because it doesn't have right angles. All right, a rhombus is a parallelogram again because opposite sides are parallel and opposite sides are equal in length, but all the sides are the same length. So I can call the shape a rhombus, I can call the shape a parallelogram, I cannot call it a rectangle. Why can I not call it a rectangle? Because it doesn't have right angles. So I can just call it a rhombus and a parallelogram. A square is a rectangle with all sides the same length. So this is a parallelogram because it's got opposite sides parallel and the same length. It is a rectangle because it has 4 right angles. It is a rhombus because all sides are the same length. And it is a square because all sides are the same length and it's got 4 right angles. So we can call this shape all of these names. And then finally, our last shape is a trapezoid. A trapezoid can only be called a trapezoid because a trapezoid has 1 pair of parallel sides. 1. Now in this shape, the top and the bottom are the sides that are parallel, but that's not always the case because you could draw it differently and then different sides would be parallel. But these 2 sides here are not parallel because if you continued them, if I can continue them here, they would eventually cross. So that means they are not parallel. But this top and this bottom one are parallel to each other. So 1 pair of parallel sides is a trapezoid. Now we are going to look more in depth at quadrilaterals on page 48. So you're going to turn to page 48 here and glue this page down. So congruent means the same size. Parallel means they'll never ever touch. And right angles means, of course, it's 90 degrees. So congruent sides. How many congruent sides does this shape here have? It has 2 sets. 2 sets. this is one set of congruent sides, and this is another set of congruent sides. How many parallel lines does it have? Again, it has two sets. These are parallel to each other, and these are parallel to each other. How many right angles does it have? Are any of these straight right angles, straight corners? No, they are not. So it has none. All right, our rectangle, congruent sides, it has two sets. Parallel sides, it has two sets. And right angles, it has four, because all four of these are right angles. So our rhombus has no right angles, two sets of parallel sides, but congruent sides, it has all sides congruent, because all four sides are the same length. It's not two sets, it's all of them. Just like our square has all sides the same length, two sets of parallel sides, but it has four right angles instead of none. So four right angles, two sets of parallel lines, and all sides congruent. Our trapezoid here, congruent sides, it varies. That means it changes, varies, as to how many congruent sides it has. Like in this specific shape, these two sides are congruent, but sometimes it could have no congruent sides. Parallel lines, that's always going to be one set. In this specific shape, the top and the bottom are the parallel lines. And right angles, that varies again because it depends on how you draw your trapezoid. Most often, this is the trapezoid that you see. However, I'm going to draw another one for you. So I could draw a trapezoid with a right angle like this. So now it actually has two right angles. It still has one set of parallel lines because the top and the bottom are parallel, and it has no congruent sides because none of these sides are congruent to each other. So you can draw your trapezoids a little bit differently sometimes, but you just need to look for, does it have one set of parallel lines, just one set, and that makes it a trapezoid. All right, moving on to page 49. You need to glue this page down on page 49 and make sure you write your page number. So it says if quadrilaterals are defined as having four sides, which shapes are classified as quadrilaterals? Well, these are all the shapes that we have been talking about in the previous two pages. So that is a parallelogram, rectangle, rhombus, square, and trapezoid. If parallelograms have four sides and two sets of parallel lines, which other shapes can also be classified as parallelograms? So which other shapes have four sides and two sets of parallel sides? Well, that would be a rectangle, a square, and a rhombus. You can write them in any order. You don't have to write them in my order. If rectangles are defined as having four sides, two sets of parallel lines, and four right angles, which other shape can be classified as a rectangle? A square can be classified as a rectangle because it has all of these characteristics. It has four sides, two sets of parallel lines, and four right angles. Can a rectangle be classified as a square? Explain. So in this previous one, we discussed that a square can be called a rectangle. But this is asking you, can a rectangle be classified as a square? So it's asking you if this shape right here, see there, can be classified as a square. And the answer to that is no, but we have to explain, because rectangles do not have all congruent sides. Congruent sides. Rectangles have two sets of congruent sides, not all congruent sides like a square does. So a rectangle does not have all the characteristics of a square, therefore we cannot call a rectangle a square, but we can call a square a rectangle. So that, I promise you, is going to be all over your test, so make sure that you study that and understand why a square can be called a rectangle, but a rectangle cannot be called a square. So you are going to do some practice with these shapes on the front side of a page in your packet, and then you can check your answers on the posted answer key, and we will be practicing with shapes for the next 2 weeks. If you have any questions, you can email me or ask me in a Zoom meeting.